All right, well, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get things started so we can maximize our time during this hour. I know some people are still coming in from Sunday school, but we want to welcome you this morning. And we should have all the kids, grade school and up, with us. I want to remind you, parents, that when we conclude our service here at 10 o'clock, that you can take your kids over and get them checked in for the 11 o'clock hour like normal. But we wanted to maximize the people over here, and we got our pastoral search team serving in a lot of spots next door so that we can free up those workers to be over here in both hours. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. I wanted to give maximum time to Brother Kyle, so he's going to come over here and say some words to you guys, and then open it up to some Q&A if you have any questions. But we just want to make this time a profitable, informative time for you guys, and ultimately looking for God's will to be done. And we will be taking the vote at the end of the next hour, at the end of the service next hour. We'll be telling you that result today. All right? So, Brother Kyle, why don't you come on up, and you guys make him feel welcome.
Hey, good morning. Great to be with you all. Finally in person. I've been watching you from a screen for the past little while, so it's good to actually see your faces and to be in person with you. Let me tell you a little bit about what we'll do this morning. Is I'm going to spend just a few minutes with you, maybe about 10 minutes, just telling you a little bit of our story, my story, and mine and Ashley's story, and kind of how we've gotten to the point where we've gotten today. And then after that, I would just like to open that up to any questions that you have. I can tell this is a Baptist church because most of you are sitting in the back. So I will try as much as I can. If you have a question, I'll walk back to you to make sure that I've heard you correctly, and they are live streaming this as well. So I'll repeat the question, and then we'll answer it. And then if you don't have any questions, we'll get out really early. Right? But I'm not expecting that at all. So we will finish up about 10 till so that we can get the live stream and things switched around for the service starting at 11. Let me tell you just a little bit of our story. I grew up in Piggott, Arkansas. Does anybody know where Piggott, Arkansas is? Well, a few of you know where Piggott, Arkansas is. Piggott, Arkansas is in northeast Arkansas. It's probably closer to Missouri than it is even Arkansas. I mean, it's tucked up in the corner so far in the east that it's probably 6 or 7 miles from Missouri on the north and the east. So it's up in the Boot Heel, very close to Missouri. Grew up in Piggott, and when we grew up in our family, we were Methodist at the time, and my dad took me on a guy's outing. And so we went and ate pizza, or went somewhere and ate, and then we went to a revival at the Baptist church in town. And as we went to that revival, I remember it was kind of set up almost like this, and it was probably about 3 or 4 rows back over here on this left-hand side. And it was during that revival time, I remember the night that my dad and I went, that it was the first time that everything just really clicked. That I really understood. Now, grown up in an incredible godly family, but it was just that moment that everything just really started coming together, where I really understood who Jesus was, that he died for me, that the only way to the Father was through the Son. And I remember that night I trusted in Jesus for my salvation and gave him my life. And I remember that, I think 11 or 12 years old at the time. And it wasn't very long after that our family went and became a part of the Baptist church there in Piggott, Arkansas. So really, since my teen years have been a Baptist, and we grew up in that church. And I really wish I could say we went to church probably every Sunday, every Wednesday, every time the doors were open. Our family was one of those families that was at church. And I was one of those guys who was all part of the youth group. Every time we had something, I was there. I mean, but it just really wasn't real to me. You know what I mean? maybe there's some of you who are in student ministry or in the youth group, and you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior. You've trusted in him for your salvation. But for me, it just wasn't an incredible time of spiritual growth in my life. And one of the things I was really looking forward to in going to college was the fact that maybe when I went to college, I didn't have to go to church anymore. Really. I mean, it just wasn't real to me. I was looking forward to some freedom, but I was also looking forward to not having to go to church. And I know that's not anything that you would ever wish for any of your children, right? Or how you would want any of your children to think, but that's what was rolling through my mind when I was 18. And when I went to college at the age of 18, I spent a few months not going to church, not very long, but then God just brought some people around me that showed me what a real relationship with Jesus was like. They showed me what a quiet time was like. They modeled for me what it really meant to have a passion for Jesus and what it meant to live life for him and to live it differently. Because I didn't have that around me among my peers when I was in high school. And that was so transformational for my life in college. And the next thing you know, my faith just exploded. Not only did my faith explode, but I was able to be a part of something. This was at Arkansas College at the time, or Lyon College is where I went to college. I went to Lyon College because I was looking for a college that had a good pre-med program. My ultimate goal was to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician, and at that time, Lyon College had a 100% acceptance rate into medical school. So I chose that college because I knew that if I made it through their pre-med program, I was more than likely to be able to get into med school. But it was during that college time, and some guys came around me, and we started just living life together. My faith exploded, and we started seeing people come to know Jesus, and faith being exploding all around us on campus. It was an amazing time of spiritual growth, not only for my life, but for a lot of us that were in college. And it was such an amazing time that through the next several years of even stepping into leadership roles within campus ministry, that God just really showed me that the desire of my heart was really not to go into medicine, but to go into full-time ministry. But I was so far along in pre-med courses by the end of my sophomore year, when God was really doing a work in my life, that I had to make a decision. I looked at going to some other colleges to transfer and go into a Bible college or do something different. It was going to cost me an extra year of college. Even looked at some different places and ultimately said, no, I really need to go to seminary after college. So I chose a chemistry degree of all things, and got a chemistry degree and went to seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. And it was in seminary when I was in Fort Worth. I was there for about 3.5 or 4 years, and midway through my seminary time, a church, I was actually, an interesting part you probably don't know about me is I made my way through seminary by teaching tennis. I played in college and worked at a country club when I was in seminary and did tennis lessons. And the next thing you know, I ended up having a pastor and about 5 deacons that were in my men's tennis league at the country club. And they kept coming to me going, hey, we want you to be our youth pastor. Will you be our youth pastor? I'm like, no. And the next thing you know, I'm like, okay, let's talk. And then I went on staff at that church while I was in seminary as a youth pastor at their church. And while I was there, I started having a lot of college students that were helping me in youth ministry. And that was a really neat thing because I started investing in those college students. I'm like, this is really great. God really did an amazing work in my life when I was in college. And what a joy it is to come alongside of these college students. I really think that maybe the next step of ministry for me is in collegiate ministry. So at that time, I did a specialization or a minor, I guess you could call it, in seminary in collegiate ministry. And then shortly after seminary, Williams Baptist College up in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas gave me a call and straight out of seminary, invited me to become their campus minister or campus pastor at Williams Baptist College. And while I was at Williams Baptist College, it was kind of one of those, unwritten rules so I'm 24 years old, right? Single guy, 24 years old, on a campus with 18 to 22-year-olds in Walnut. Did anybody know where Walnut Ridge, Arkansas is? So Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, in the middle of nowhere with not many people to meet. So where in the world am I going to find someone to marry, right? Well, just so happens I was there for about 2.5 years, and then started through a prayer walk one time. I said, "Hey, I want you to come back and talk with me," to Ashley. And she came back and talked. We were talking about ministry, and the next thing you know, we just started clicking in conversation. And then it was through that I actually went to the president of the college, and because it's kind of one of those unwritten things that I'm on staff at the campus, and so I'm really not supposed to be dating a student. And so I went to the president, who was my supervisor, and I got permission to date a student who was going into her senior year. And it was really interesting as I went into his office, and I'm nervous as can be, sitting down with a 65 to 70-year-old man trying to get his permission to date someone. I mean, and I sit down with him and I say, "Hey, I'm interested in someone. I know we're not supposed to do this kind of unwritten thing, but," and he turns into like one of those little 8th grade girls. He leans up in his seat and goes, "Who is it?" It was so funny. And I told him, "It's Ashley Easter." He's like, "Oh, she is so sweet." He said, "You've been here long enough. We know you, and we just asked you not to date around. But we knew inviting a young single guy in that in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, there's only one place you're going to find anybody, and that's going to be right here." So he gave me his blessing, and through the summer before her senior year, and then through her senior year, we dated and then married. We were married after that. And it was shortly after that process. It was about 3 months after we were married, or 2 months after we were married, started conversation with Second Baptist Church in Conway about coming on and being their college pastor. And so about 2 months, we knew that we were moving. So about 6 months after we were married, we were moving to Conway, Arkansas, where we were in Conway for 13 years. I started out as college pastor, and then it kind of morphed into college and missions, and then it morphed into college, a little bit of college, a lot more missions, and then discipleship, and then it morphed into discipleship and missions, and then overseeing all the education staff. So it's kind of a slow fade transition into discipleship pastor there at Second Baptist. It was between pastors at one time that I was probably 7 or 8 years ago that I was looking into the senior pastor or lead pastor role. And as I was in that kind of transition, and Second Baptist was in a pastoral transition as well, the pastor that came in, his first conversation with me, as we sat down, his first conversation is, "Here, you're leaving." So when you, like your boss, and the first thing your boss says to you is, "I hear you're gone." Isn't that a great conversation? But he said, "I hear you're leaving." And I said, "Yeah, I feel God's calling me into, lead pastor role." And so we're looking for that kind of opportunity right now. And it was over the course of the next month or so that he saw what was happening in collegiate ministry and how we were doing disciple making in the context of collegiate ministry, that he sat me down and he said, "Hey, Kyle, I want what's happening in the college ministry to happen among our whole church. Do you think you could do that? And if you could, I want you to stay and not leave." So we entered into a conversation there that I quit looking towards a lead pastor role at that time and entered into staying at Second Baptist and really helping to figure out how to transition into more of a disciple-making mindset and model of ministry at the church. And so that happened for several years, and then a church in Kansas called me up that we have some mutual friends, and they were looking for an adult ministries pastor or discipleship pastor there at their church. And as they were looking for a position, I told the pastor, I said, hey, if you're looking for someone to come in and lead your small groups or your Sunday schools, I said, I'm not your guy. I said, but if you're looking for someone to help lead you to do small groups or life groups or community groups or Sunday school in the context of disciple making, let's have a conversation. And so after we started looking and going into that, we've been in Wichita for the past 3 years, and it's been an incredible experience for us. It's been a great transition for our family of being there for the past 3 years. Is a lot of the feel of where we are in Wichita felt a whole lot like where we were in Conway, so it was a great transition for our family. And then about 5 months ago, the search committee somehow got an old resume from David, and then reached out, and we started connecting and started talking through this process, and it's been a great journey. But just wanted to give you just a little bit of a snapshot of kind of who I am and the journey that we've been on, and how God has kind of been moving a little bit of a snapshot with a whole lot of holes. And if you have any questions about that journey, I'd love to answer those for you, or any other questions that you have about ministry or the church or me or Ashley or Abby loves to answer questions. This is my wife, Ashley. She is over here. And this is our redhead, Abby. And she's 9 years old. And I know you're thinking, where did that come from? That's exactly what we thought as well. That's exactly what we thought. She popped out and we're like, what? But two down is my sister, Emily. So she has some red hair. So now you see where the red hair comes from. And so let's open it up just to any questions that you guys might have on things that I can answer for you. Yes. Sure. You didn't apply for the job? Not initially. Well, you said something about, and you looked at James, about David sending in your resume, an old resume. So I think, and y'all help me here, because I don't know that I even know the full story, but here's, I think the transition team, when the transition team was put together, the transition team with David Bond on the team, put together a pastoral profile of, hey, who are we looking for? What are characteristics? What are traits? And then at the end of that process, they turned to David and said, hey, David, who would you see? And I was one of the people that David said, hey, you need to look at this guy. And I think along with me and several other people, he gave a recommendation. Is that correct? Or
Right. Hot mic. That's exactly right. David gave us about 7 or 8 recommendations that he had, and one of those was Brother Kyle. And David had sent me in the pastoral search team his resume, but it was an older resume, and so we kind of set that to the side a little bit, and then just put him in the official stream of things.
Sure.
And we reached out. Karen sent him an email officially from the team, started that whole conversation, but that initial contact got lost. It somehow went to junk mail or something like that. So long story short, we eventually did finally connect with him. It was in our second wave, past that December 31st deadline. He ended up being the 10th resume that we received in, and the rest is history. He submitted a little bit more updated resume, which was pretty similar to what it was before, but had some updates and things like that. And then the rest, he went through the process.
Yeah, so thanks for the clarification. They didn't just reach out. They were reaching out from an old resume saying, hey, are you interested in this position? Because they'd received an old resume, a 3-year-old resume. So David Bond, who you had here, was also the interim pastor at Second Baptist Conway about 3 years ago. So I was with David in an interim, so he had my resume at that time. And so that's why he gave that and several other resumes to the committee. Does that help any? Does that help you a little bit? Okay. Oh, sure. Thank you for that. Yeah. Any clarification and believe me, if I say anything wrong, my mom's here too. She'll correct me. She has done that before in the middle of a sermon. No joke. Now, I was like 20 at the time, but she did that. One of the first messages I ever preached was my mom raising her hand going, "Now tell them this." Yes, that's my mom. Other questions? Yes. Sure. Well, so my ideal church, and this is not a political answer, okay? This isn't, my ideal church is a church that is pursuing disciple making and is wanting to reach out to the community around it. So it has a whole lot less to do with style. It has a whole lot less to do with numbers. It has a whole lot less to do with a lot of things than it does a desire to grow spiritually, a desire to be challenged spiritually, and a desire to pass that on to the next generation and to pass that on to others that are around us. So, and hopefully a part of my story that you've heard was not just the opportunity to kind of stair step, but all along the way, whether it was at First Baptist to not pursue a lead pastor role, was to stay and do disciple making. To go to Wichita was in part because they wanted to talk through what it meant to do disciple making. So my dream role, my dream church is to be a part of a body and to be able, at this moment, to be able to lead from a lead pastor role of what disciple making looks like in the context of a church. Because I've been doing it as the number 2 seat and helping lead the church in disciple making in a number 2 role at 2 different churches. And so basically I've been doing everything except for standing on the pulpit and it coming out of my mouth, even to the point where I sit down and give talking points to the pastors of what to say. So I am primed and ready and looking forward to being able to be the lead guy leading the whole charge for disciple making. So my dream church is a church that is making disciples the way Jesus has called us to make disciples, the way that we see it in Scripture be done. So is that, I know, yeah, that is my heart. And that's what I'm pursuing. And that's one of the reasons, that I'm in the conversation with you guys. Because from very early on, I think I put on my bio and my resume some things that I have been doing in the area of disciple making. And then from very early on, we started talking through disciple making conversations because the church had identified we need to grow in this area. And so that was one of those, okay, here we are moments, let's talk for me, because this was more than just a lead pastor position. This was a church that was going, hey, we need to take steps in this area. And I'm like, okay, we're sharing the same kind of heart. Let's start talking about whether we're speaking the same language and understanding the same definition of this or not. And I think another thing that is a part of my heart as well is in the area of missions. I know you all have a huge heart and desire for missions. And that has been something that has drawn me to your church as well, and something that I really want to help, not just sustain, but to help grow that in the church as well. Does that make sense? So I think really discipleship and missions are who I am, and I started sensing that from your committee and the things that I was hearing, and I said, okay, there's some traction here between us that we can keep going in conversation, because those are the things that mean the most to me. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Any other questions? I got 2 questions back here. So, ladies first. Am I looking for something long term? Yes, definitely, yes. Yes, definitely not. You're definitely looking for something long. Yes, I'm looking for something long term. I'm hoping you're looking for something long term. Okay? And so that's a two-way street, right? It's a hey, I need to be on that route. You need to be on that route as well. And so, yes, I'm definitely looking for something long term. My whole family lives around here, and so we even my wife's family lives close to here. So I mean, we've got family here. It's an opportunity for what God has ultimately called me to as a lead pastor role. So yes, and except for really, this is my 4th stop in ministry. When my first one was right out of seminary as a college pastor, and then my next one was 13 years at the same church. So I think I have a track record of not moving on, and the reason I'm looking at this position now is, one, it's because it's a lead pastor role, and it's close to home, and you guys have said, hey, let's talk about disciple making. So that all these things are coming together into one thing. So that's the only reason I'm leaving a place within, because I hate the idea of leaving where I am in Kansas after being there for 3 years. That's very, very tough. So, yeah. Yes? Okay. Sure. You- Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
don't know the problems well enough, know the people well enough, but in a short answer, how do you, you ready for that?
I don't even know where in the world to begin. I immediately grabbed down something, started writing, and I'm like, I don't know what to write down here. But so the first thing you talked about is the church hopping that happens. And I've never experienced that before at any other place. Kansas isn't like that. Everybody comes in and they immediately stay, and they've been there forever and never switch churches. No, I'm just kidding. No. If you haven't picked up on it yet, I do have my spiritual gift is sarcasm, and that's a problem. Sometimes you've heard this phrase that your back door is bigger than your front door is. You have a lot of people coming in, but you have even more people leaving. Again, this is not like this political, lots of times you ask a question in church and the answer is always Jesus. It's always God. It's always Jesus. I really think the answer to this question is spiritual maturity and its depth, and it's offering things that help people grow. I think when we help people grow, people will stick. And so I think that's one of the things. And so a lot of what you're seeing with the jumping or the switching is probably you're seeing that, would you say, from the younger generation? And so we've got to look and see what some of the younger generation, I'm saying 45 and below, what are they looking for? Why are they jumping? And how does that fit with who we are or not fit with who we are? Let me tell you just a few things that I think that doesn't cause people to jump, but 4 things I think that is critical for the younger generation and what they're looking for. Now, granted, there's a lot of churches that are all about show and get great numbers, but that is kind of short-lived, and they keep on cycling more and more people in. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is how do we connect people into deeper relationships, growth in spiritual growth, and helping them to develop into family. I think there's 4 things that we have to be very good at if the younger generation is going to quit hopping and stick. Okay? 4 things is I believe they're not the ones who are serious and really wanting more are not looking for flash. They're looking for good, sound biblical teaching. They want to come in and not just have their ears tickled. They want to learn. They want to learn the truths and the depths of God's word, okay? And so I think that's very important is sound biblical teaching, one. I think there needs to be authentic worship is something that they are looking for. I tell you, that's one of the big reasons that when I was 18, that I didn't want to be a part of the church anymore. Because honestly, it wasn't real. And I looked around, and what was happening in the church wasn't anything of what I thought real worship should look like. I mean, for instance, I was part of a church that we would sing Victory in Jesus, and it looked like someone just ran over your puppy on the way to church. I mean, that's not real. And for an 18-year-old, I'm looking around the room and you're singing Victory in Jesus and it looks like you're at a funeral. And there's a huge disconnect for me. And I was like, no, this is not real, and I don't know if I want to be a part of this. So I was looking for something that was real and authentic, and I've seen guys that are in church that have more passion for a football game on a Friday night than they do about Jesus on a Sunday. So there's a disconnect there. So we have to have real, authentic worship, biblical teaching. I think we have to have real family and community that has to exist. And so I think that's the reason that you see a lot of this community group kind of thing that is happening. Why? Because there's just something different between this younger generation of sitting in someone's home, eating, talking about Scripture, living life together in a way that's a little bit different than what the church walls can produce in an hour. And so that's attractional to a family, but it helps them to draw in deeper into a community, into a family. So biblical teaching, authentic worship, real family and community. And then I think there has to be some kind of purpose beyond themselves. Purpose beyond themselves. They are being challenged to live out their faith. They don't want to come to church. They want to live out the church outside these walls. I think that's key, that when they see a church that is not just about the worship gathering, but is about coming in here and worshiping, right? And then we leave worship, because worship is the beginning of the week. And then we're just getting ready for what God has called us to outside these walls. When we have that kind of mentality, then that's what is attracting for that younger generation, because then they start seeing the church as something that I'm coming in and I'm getting filled up and I'm getting fueled up, and then I'm getting my charging orders for the rest of the week that I can go take the gospel to my neighborhood. I'm taking the gospel to my neighbors. I'm taking the gospel to my work, right? And so I think those four things are something that we need to look at and go, how are we doing in these areas? What does it look like? Because I think those are the reasons, some of the reasons that people continue to hop is because they're not finding what they're really longing for and desiring. And I think sometimes, not all the time, but I think for a lot of times, a lot of the younger generation, I've spent a majority of my ministry with the younger generation. So what are they really looking for? I don't think they're looking for flash. I don't think they're looking for a concert. I think they're looking for substance. And how can we provide them substance with meaning that helps them to grow spiritually? That will help them to not shift. Now, what was your other questions? Does that even come close to touching anything that you... How are we going to deal with that situation? We're going to, for one, and this is one of the things that I told, and I think you guys heard this last week, but I told this to the committee because they asked me the exact same question. How would you deal with that? I said, for one, we have to quit just doing things just to do things. We have to quit doing, just stacking on ministries on top of ministries just because we like it. Just because I like something, you like something, we like something, next thing you know, guess what? We are so busy doing so many things that we have absolutely no purpose and no direction and no focus. So the first thing is we say, okay, what is our direction? What is our purpose? What is our focus? Where are we going in ministry? What is our ultimate goal and ultimate aim? And then all of the ministries and everything that we do aligns with that purpose and that direction. And so I think it first and foremost, it comes down to who we are and where we're going, and then everything that we do funnels into that. So really, this is not a Sunday night question. This is not a community group question. This is not a Wednesday night question. This is a philosophy and vision in ministry question and how things fit. Because if it's not, then it becomes a what about Sunday night? Then it becomes what about community groups? Then it becomes what about Wednesday night? Then it becomes about what about Sunday school? Then it becomes what about this? And then next thing you know, we start stacking. It's what I told the committee. It's the difference between a menu church and a map church. Have any of you ever been to Cheesecake Factory? It's one of mine and Ashley's favorite places to go. Now, they have a menu. Have you ever seen their menu? It's really not like a menu. It's more like a novel. And that's what I've seen a whole lot in churches. Okay, I like this, so let's add it. Let's just add, and let's just add. And there's no purpose in doing this except that we like to do this and we find that it's good, so let's just stack it on top. And the next thing you know, that we have no vision, we have no direction, we don't know where we're going. We're just doing a lot of really, really good godly things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we're losing something when that is our mentality. Does that make sense? So I think we need to take a step back and we need to say, who are we? I think we need to take a step and say, where are we going? And then how are we going to get there? And then we look and see how all of these different things flow into that life. Is that, and I don't mean to undercut the question or circumvent the answer, but I mean, that's really honestly how I would say about anything right now is, hey, let's wait and see, because we need to figure out where we're going in the purpose and direction of ministry. And then we need to figure out how that fits in with everything that we're doing. And, you know, honestly, and I know you're asking, and several of you have asked about, what about Sunday night kind of things? So as an outsider, I'm looking at everything that is happening here, and you know my question is, how in the world is this church going to do anything in disciple making? So busy, so many activities, so much going on, and all really good things. And I've heard from a transition team, I've heard from the search team, and I've heard from a lot of you how you want to take strides in disciple making, and I look at all the programming happening, I'm like, they don't have time. Does that make sense? So are we really serious about making disciples or do disciple making in a different way? That may mean that some things might have to change in order to be able to do that. Are you with me? I mean, does that make sense? So it's like we've got to think about all of these things. Like, who are we? Where are we going? And what are we doing right now? And what is it producing? If our current systems, are they producing the end result that we're wanting? Because you're saying that things are hopping around. So obviously there's something that's a part of the system that is not producing the desired results in the end. So what is going to keep people from hopping? What is going to keep people grounded and rooted and going, I've been here for 50 years and here's why. And there's no way I'm leaving this place. So there's something happening where that's not the case. So why is that? Let's take a gut, honest look at what is happening and go, what are we going to do about that? What is God calling us to? So maybe that helps answer. Yeah, Steve.
Thank you for being here this morning. So I got a couple of different angles to questions too. You talk about discipleship making, and
Sure.
truthfully, especially I think for the people that have been here for a while, like I told you yesterday afternoon, I think that was probably the greatest spiritual growth time in our church when we started a discipleship program 20 some odd years ago, and it just kind of went away for whatever reason.
Sure.
But one of the things in discipleship making is if you're pouring into somebody, somebody has to be pouring into you.
Mm-hmm.
So who's pouring into you?
Who's pouring into me?
That's one question.
Yes.
So the second question is, do you love people? And you know, because we have a great church here, but we're very unique. You know, I'm not like Tony, but I love Tony. I'm not like Don, but I love Don. We're very different. And some of us, you know, Don, me, Tony, are somewhat unlovable some people. Yeah. Well, it is what it is. You know, so can you love all types of people? And third, and this one maybe you don't even want to go to, and I hate to even put you on the spot, but you know the world hates our guts right now. The world hates us because they hated Christ first. You know, and I don't want to make this into a political deal, but you know, do you dare touch on that this morning? Because we're in a fight right now. We're in a spiritual warfare where the world hates our guts. And so what do we do about that at Bologna First Baptist under your leadership?
Good. So who's pouring into me? I have multiple levels and layers of that happening. One is the lead pastor that I'm under right now is a part of an accountability group. I have an elder that is at our church who is my accountability partner. When I got to Wichita 3 years ago, he was an elder, and he and I started having a conversation, and he wasn't in an accountability group, and he knew I was new, and so we started talking and said, hey, let's do this together, because as an elder at the church, then I can talk on a different level than I can with just, you know, someone else that might be in the church. So I have someone that I can talk with who's an elder. I also always have a disciple-making group of guys that are with me. I've got 4 or 5 guys right now that are with me, that we're asking one another questions and meeting every single week to talk through what God is speaking to us about, what sin is in our life, how we're holding one another accountable, sharing Christ, core spiritual disciplines in our life. So that's happening. I think it's happening on multiple layers and levels in my life, is someone pouring into me. The one thing I don't have, especially coming here, would be that lead pastor pouring into. So that would be something I would be looking into, is a lead pastor walk beside me as I'm walking into this position. So I don't have that yet, but that would be something I would be searching for. But here's the key, and I think one of the things I think you need to know is I am big on accountability, huge on accountability, and I really believe that a lot of the reason that we have seen a lot of pastors fail in ministry is because we have set up a CEO in the pastoral position, and we've left them alone, and we've given them the keys to the kingdom, and then pride and sin and mess has happened and entered into their hearts, and there's been nobody around them to help them, to hold them accountable to staying above reproach. And so as a part of the search committee, we talked about this leadership and accountability question. And one of the things that I said is, in your documents, it looks like you've really set up the lead pastor as the tip of the spear, right? And it doesn't look like there's a lot of accountability around it. One of the things that I would be asking to be established, that I would establish, is a group that would come around me for the purpose of accountability. Does that make sense? And what I'm saying is they're not holding me accountable. We're holding one another accountable. I don't agree in the I'm here over you approach to accountability. If it's going to be accountability, it's going to be me holding you accountable, you holding me accountable. It's mutual accountability that happens. So, does Steve, that help kind of answer that first question? Do I have a love for people? Boy, I hope so. I really do hope so. And I hope that you experience that. I hope that's probably one of the biggest strengths that I have, is the ability to connect multiple generations and relate to multiple generations, and the desire to pastor multiple generations. So I really hope that not only that I say that I love people, but I hope that you go, no, he's right. He really does love us. And I'm going to touch on that here in a few minutes in the message as well. And so the world hates us. So what do? It's more of a political talk, and so I'll do a political answer for the political talk. Is that okay? I'm just kidding. But no, I think one of the greatest things that we can do as a church in this is Jesus said this himself. People will know that you are my disciples based on the love that you show other people. I think one of the greatest lights and examples that we have in the church available to us is when we live differently than the rest of the world. And so we love to come in with our voices and tell people what to do and how it should be. And I think that it's good to do that, but I think we need to major on living out the gospel, being who God has called us to be. Let our love for one another so shine among others that they want to be a part of it and is an example of who he is. I really think that is the key, is how we love one another is one of the greatest lights that we have, and the greatest show of an example of who Jesus is. And so that's where I think I would take that answer of the world hates us. What do? We show them that there's something different. And for long enough, we've been grandstanding and we've been telling the world, if you've ever think about this, we are really good at telling everyone else what we are against. don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. We're against this, we're against this, we're against. So why don't we start showing the world what we are for? We are for the gospel. We are for the gospel impacting lives. We want to see transformation. We want to live as generous people in our community. We want the community to see us as different and not just the big church down the street with a big building and a lot of resources. When they think of us, may they not think about the buildings or the stained glass. May they first thing go, those are some really neat people who love Jesus and live differently. So I think that's kind of where we should go. So it is 10:51, and I would love to answer a lot more questions from you, but it is time for us to get ready for live stream and everything else. James, I'm going to turn this back over to you for a second.
In his defense, we have asked him to do a hard stop around 10 till so we can reset and give you guys a quick break. Remember, you can go ahead and take your children next door. Brother Dan's back here. If you've already checked them in, he'll lead them. But if you haven't checked them in, you'll need to go next door and check them in to the church hour. So let's go ahead and be dismissed right now and be back here in 10 minutes to start our worship hour.